This is The Trend, where you get enlightened perspective on trending news and topics with amazing commentary. I am your host, RTL Faith. Welcome to the podcast, and as always, we breed debates, discussions, solutions, and overall compassion. Welcome to the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, and I have some news for you. That intro I just did, it'll be a lot more professional moving forward with some segment jingles, intros, I don't know what you call them, moving forward. Other news, this is the 20th episode of the podcast, so I have little benchmarks every time I hit a certain milestone of the podcast. Appreciate everybody who's been listening and supporting. We plan to grow the podcast even more. So moving forward, we will have a consistent schedule for episodes 3 times a week moving forward. Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday will be the days that I'll be publishing. The episodes will be dropped online on terms of like the audio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, 7 a.m. I'll have it planned so it'll be publishing 7 a.m. So maybe if you're driving to work or you got a workout in the morning, you can listen to the episode. So that is how things are going to be working from now on moving forward. In addition to that, I also plan to make each episode for the week, for the day of the week, Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday, their own unique type of episode. What I mean by that is I'll be doing 3 different types of episodes moving forward. We're going to have these Sunday episodes where there'll be the 1v1 guests that we've been doing for a while now. We'll be talking about specific topics, having good discussions, potential debates, coming up with potential solutions about things, news, and what is going on in our current society. On Tuesday, I'll be dropping an episode called Faithful Conversations, a play on words on the latter part of the name of my social media name, RTL Faith. And what these are going to be conversations with groups of people about a specific topic, hearing general feedback from other either random people or people I know. And it's going to be more of a collective Socratic type of discussion, hearing genuine feedback. Eventually, I plan to evolve that a little bit more. Maybe even go out in the public and start doing genuine interviews with random people on the streets. We'll see. We'll see. As long as the podcast keeps moving forward, we'll do that one of these days. And then Fridays will be called RTL Rants. And these are completely solo episodes where I'm talking about a specific topic or doing a specific thing that I want to talk about, that I feel like it's necessary to talk about, or do something that is potentially fun in my personal opinion. So a lot of things to discuss, And today's episodes is going to be an RTL rant. We're going to end the first, not season, but first level of the podcast with an RTL rant. I have something that I want to discuss, and these are just going to be a little bit different. Like I said, it's going to be solo. But we're going to start it off, as always, with a comment, with a review, to see what some people are saying about the podcast, so I can get genuine feedback, genuine opinions about things that are done over here. One of the reviews I have here is from actually, a former guest. She gave her feedback, and she said, "Fun host, excellent host. I enjoyed speaking about dating and answering fun, informative questions." So appreciate that, Sequoia. That's what we try to do here, and we are going to continue to have these dynamic discussions moving forward. So for these RTO rants, how they're going to go is they're going to be 2 topics in particular that I'm going to be ranting about. I'm going to have a general opinion about. Now, it could be 2 newsworthy topics, philosophical questions, or some fun thing that I thought that would be interesting to share in terms of my personal take on it. Today, we're going to be talking about two very important questions for men and for society and American politics. First thing is regarding Joe Biden's student debt relief program and how there is a 50-50 split in terms of some people don't like it, some people really like it. I'll give my feedback from a person who does have student loan debt, and people like Ben Shapiro have a very interesting take. We'll touch upon that in a second. And another topic that I want to talk about is how are men supposed to handle their emotions? I feel like this is going to be very important because the ways men or boys growing up are dealing with strife and turmoil, there's a lot of different layers to it, and there's a lot of different perspectives on how it's supposed to be done. And I'm just going to give my personal take on it from everything that I've heard from a lot of different people. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the student loan debt relief program that Joe Biden is implementing. So some of the backlash that I've heard in regards to this is that obviously it's unfair that people are going to probably increase their taxes for people to relieve some of their debt. Now, before I really go into that specifically, I'm going to read some of the layers of what's supposed to be regarding this debt relief program. And then I'm going to touch upon some of the extra stuff as well. Now, one of the first things is that this program is supposed to provide targeted debt relief to address the financial harms of the pandemic. Makes sense. Fulfilling the president's campaign commitment. The Department of Education will provide up to $20,000 in debt cancellation to Pell Grant recipients. If you know what the Pell Grant is, when you fill out a FAFSA when you're applying for college, a Pell Grant is one of the programs or the grants that gives you extra money so you can afford said college. It waivers for person to person to determine how much money you actually receive. Pell Grant recipients with loans held by the Department of Education and up to $10,000 in debt cancellation to non-Pell Grant recipients. So someone who had the Pell Grant gets $20,000 debt cancellation. Someone without the Pell Grant gets $10,000 debt cancellation. Pell Grants are usually people who, need that affordable income. So that's probably why it decreases if you didn't get rewarded the Pell Grant. Borrowers are eligible for this relief if their individual income is less than $125,000 as a single individual or $250K for married couples. No high-income individual or high-income household in the top 5% of incomes will benefit from this action. So, this is very huge. This is the crux of the debt relief program, is that $20,000 of your debt could be taken away if not only were you a Pell Grant recipient, but also if you're relatively low income, making under $125,000 a year, which I'm sure is a lot of people, especially considering the middle class is shrinking. So making less than six figures, making less than 125 grand is probably a decent amount of individuals. We'll talk about the fairness, if that's a good amount, in a second. The second part of this, make the student loan system more manageable for current and future borrowers by cutting monthly payments in half for undergraduate loans. This, I'm not going to read everything for you guys. This is some information you can look up, of course, by yourself. But what this is basically indicating is that the monthly loan payments that you're making to the loan provider will be cut in half to be a little bit more affordable for people who are lower income. All right. The next part of it is fixing the broken public service loan forgiveness program, PSLF, by proposing a rule that borrowers who have worked at a nonprofit, in the military, or in federal, state, tribal, or local government receive appropriate credit toward loan forgiveness. This is very smart in terms of the government because it's providing more incentives to work jobs that is related to the government in some capacity. It makes a lot of sense. People who are doing any one of these things are are doing a huge service for the government. So in terms of federal student loans, I mean, it makes sense that they will help with the situation in the first place. So I don't mind that personally. I mean, I am innately biased because I used to be in the military, but I don't think this is going to be effective towards me personally. But I do think if someone is paying a service in terms of helping the country in some capacity, they should be awarded for that in this situation. Next, protect future students and taxpayers by reducing the cost of college and holding schools accountable when they hike up prices. Now, this was a huge one, because basically what this is saying is that the government wants to really put their foot down in terms of these crazy tuition prices. Because let's be honest, college is expensive as hell. People have said it time and time again how American colleges are so freaking expensive compared to so many other developed countries. It's kind of weird if you really think about how expensive it is. Now, you can make the argument that the expenses are necessary due to the resources that a lot of these high tier colleges have. Sure, fair enough to some capacity, but I do think that the allocation of resources that they put this money tuition towards is also very questionable, especially considering when you have college athletes making millions of dollars going to the same college as every other student. There seems to be some kind of weird innate, I don't know, unfairness for being a student in terms of academia versus an athlete. I'm just saying, I've been saying that for a very, very long time. So let's read this a little bit more in depth so we can get a little bit more details. So the president championed the largest increase to Pell Grants in over a decade and one of the largest one-time influxes to college and universities. To further reduce the cost of college, the president will continue to fight to double the maximum Pell Grant and make community college free. I think this is absolutely huge. Community college is such a huge resource that people that, if you're in high school, you go like, oh yeah, that's for stupid poor people, because you're like, you don't have a good outlook in terms of community college. But everybody who's been through college, who's an actual adult, they realize, yeah, community college is legit. And if you make it free, that will incentivize so many people to put their foot in the door in terms of a college education and realize very quickly for themselves, is this education for me? Now, I do think there's probably going to be a penalty of sorts, which is deservingly so, if you drop out early, because that's resources being given to someone who dropped out of a free education. But this is a good starting point. Maximum Pell Grant, I've heard that the Pell Grant has reduced in cost in comparison to the tuition. Like, you get like a $5,000 Pell Grant and your tuition's like $40,000 a year. Like, it doesn't really help that much. You need a lot more than just a Pell Grant to really help with your education. So that's huge. That's honestly huge in terms of that. And I was very skeptical at first. Sure, I was kind of joking around in terms of, yo, Biden, what are you doing, bro? Like, yeah, I mean, if you want to take the money, the debt out of my pocket away, then I'm not going to say no. I'm going to shake your hand and smile. But if I'm really thinking about Joe Biden in this situation, very interesting proposal. Seems very beneficial to a lot of people, especially low income and students of the future. But the question is, will he be able to pull this off? Because a lot of people have questioned is if he even has this authority. It has been indicated that only Congress can do something like take student debt away. So does Biden have the authority to do this in the first place? We'll have to see. And the holding off of student debt is also very interesting, considering this is probably a ploy in terms of election time. One of the big things for Joe Biden is if he does pull this off, or if he does implement this as some fashion and really relieve some debt, a lot of people, a lot of young people, and even older people are going to be on Joe Biden's side for a good reason, considering student loan debt is one of the biggest inhibitors in terms of daily life, because you taking out hundreds of dollars out of your bank account to pay for a college education that you may have not even benefited from in the first place. Now, I have heard the argument, I have heard it, that it's not fair, that if you took this debt out, then you should be responsible for it. And I do understand that logic. I do understand why Ben Shapiro would say something like that. But also, you have to take into account a few things. First thing, I do think there's a way to implement it so people who are actually going to college and making something out of their life in terms of the college education and are trying to actually have a fruitful occupation and career, maybe they deserve a certain benefit because the college education that they received is not inherently beneficial to them moving forward, especially considering how the economy is currently. You could definitely see that point of view. You would have to map out, is this person really doing what is necessary in terms of their career or their occupation? Or did they just waste the college time and now they're getting benefits from the president? You have to weigh that out somehow. I'm sure there's some more innate details. We can go into that some other time in terms of how you do that. Another perspective you have to look at it from that is also very interesting is the way America is structured in terms of its college system. We are preached, we are told, we are instructed after high school, even in middle school, to go to college, College is part of life. Getting student debt is part of life. So to say things such as, okay, you put yourself in the situation, you fix it, there is a 50-50 way to really assess that statement. 50% of it is true that you're an adult, fix your problems. Another 50% is you are still young and the system put in place by America in terms of education is purposely putting yourself in debt in the first place. So it's really hard for anyone to logically look at the situation in terms of American students after college, especially considering a lot of them do college and then get a career or occupation that does not even have anything to do with their college degree. A lot of people do college because they are told to go to college, but have no idea why they're in college in the first place. I've preached multiple times, that the only people that should really be going to college are those people who are doing a specialization or doing a specialized job. For example, a lawyer, you need to go to school. A doctor, you need to go to school. Astronaut, a physicist, it goes on and on and on. But if you're just going to college just to go to college, a waste of time. Community college is an option. Getting an online degree very quickly for a specific job field, whether it's IT, whether it's marketing, a lot of that stuff you can do either without a college degree or do online and get a certification. But this is the kicker. Schools don't teach you how to do that. We know why. It's because they're trying to train you to be a worker. So they're putting you in debt in purpose. So let's be honest on what actually school is. If it was really trying to set you up to be as successful as you possibly can, then sure, I would agree with you. You reap what you sow. But it's not. It puts you in a situation, unless you're truly talented, unless you're truly capable, or unless you have the resources and the networking around you and the support system to really get and become successful. More than likely, you will have to go from the ground up anyway. But this time, you have college debt to worry about. The amount of people who talk about college debt, literally everybody you meet has college debt. And it's not like it's cheap, like, oh, maybe a couple thousand. No, it's at least $20,000 bare minimum. So we have to understand that we have to rework the education system for it to be really beneficial for the students and the young adults going into college in the first place. They've took steps in terms of student athletes. Now they're getting paid and getting full rides. So only like the smartest of athletes are really getting any benefit from it, right? Or the most talented of athletes are really getting any benefit from it. Obviously, if you have the right connections and if you are very smart and do very well in school, you may have a full ride as well. But even in those situations, due to status, due to glorifications of certain programs over another, even if you get straight A's in your high school, you may still have to go to college and take out student loans. It's very interesting and very corrupt. So no, I do agree with us helping students. Innately, I'm biased because I've been through the college system in the first place and criticized public education time and time again. I went to a private school, so I decided to go to a school that I thought would be more fruitful. But purely going to college just because I was told to go to college is really why I went. Now, I thought I was going to become a lawyer, but innately I decided against that, especially considering I'm just going to put myself in more and more debt. But that was a decision I made, of course. A lot of people do not have the foresight to think like that. And they put themselves in a precarious situation anyway. How will this affect taxes, though? How will this affect the common individual? Those are legitimate questions. Those are things that we definitely need answers for. And we'll have to see how this is kind of addressed moving forward. Will this even happen? Maybe. Will this be the changing of times in terms of college education? Maybe. Or is this just a ploy in terms of giving more votes during election time? Maybe. We shall see. Now, I want to touch upon our second topic of today. And this one is a lot more in depth for a person that you may receive something out of it. And that is, how are men supposed to handle emotions? It's a very interesting time period for men in America specifically. You could even say the Western society. It's very interesting. And the reason why I want to touch upon this question is very simple. I thought about it. I thought about tragedy. I thought about receiving negative news. And as an individual who has received very, very bad news as of recently, and really taking myself into hindsight, is like, how am I supposed to act? Was very telling. How are men supposed to act? Now, I don't use myself as a good example in terms of like the most appropriate actions in terms of good, bad, or neutral news. Some may say that I have certain tendencies that don't align with the appropriate emotional response. But I do observe very well. And I observe people and how they are told how to act. Specifically men. So the question is now is like, how would other men in a general circumstance be told to react from tragic news, especially stacked upon tragic news? Now, one side of the spectrum would say something like, let it all out. Be as emotional as you want. Let your feelings pour out. And it makes sense to an extent. But there is an innate perception that an emotional man is a weak one. That an emotional man is undesirable. that an emotional man is incapable. There are certain standards like that, for sure, especially all around the world. Now, the more West Americanized look at it is that, oh, be in touch with your emotions, be in touch with your feminine side. But it's been called out many of times that even after this advice has been told, it was false. Women tell you all the time on the streets that she doesn't want an emotional man. She doesn't want a man to be telling her all his feelings. You hear it. You see the opinions on social media, on all these different videos. You see it out there. So if that's the case, what's the other perspective? Well, the other perspective is hold it in. Don't tell anybody what is going on with you. Work past the emotions. Do better. Be stronger. Okay. A lot more of a masculine perspective, a more traditional way of thinking for a man. And honestly, that is, whether you believe it or not, what boys are constantly told. When a girl's being emotional, she gets whatever she wants. When a boy's being emotional, suck it up. Be a man. Is that toxic? Is that how it's supposed to be? That is the question that is being asked right now. So you have these two competing perspectives. And that's probably why in situations like Andrew Tate, when he appears on the platform trying to tell men to be stronger, be better, that a lot of men draw to him. Because in America specifically, it's very confusing what the right course of action is supposed to be. Because even if you go into the more emotional feminine side of the spectrum, or a man is letting out his emotions, telling people how he feels, even if that's generally accepted, the perception of the man still changes. He's not looked at as masculine. So there's still an inherent change whether you want it to be there or not. But then people say if you hold it in, you can end up very toxic. And there's a lot of times where it ends up very bad. There is a reason why suicide rate for men is incredibly high. There's a reason why so many desperate men go to things like OnlyFans and pay hundreds of dollars just to talk to an attractive woman. There's a reason why there are so many pathetic guys out there doing unspeakable things just for attention. Because there is confusion of how is a man supposed to be. You got certain people saying one thing and other people saying another. So what is the right course of action? So for me personally, I'm going to go through my perspective on the matter. Because there could be nuance on either side where it's productive. And I'm coming at this at a perspective based off complete objectivity. Based on what I think is best from what I've seen and what I've witnessed and been told. Not from a place of personal experience. The reason why I'm not going to come at it from personal experience is as I elicited earlier. Because I don't believe I am a good example on how to act. There's a difference between acting logically based on a serious and tragic situation and being affected appropriately emotionally. And we're going to touch upon the emotional side, not the actions. The actions should be self-explanatory. It's condolences, it's being there for the person, it's getting help and support. The actions are self-explanatory, but the emotions are the tough part, the part that is hard to truly understand because it's emotion. So for me personally, when it comes to men in America, at the very least, they're told a lot of different things. And one thing is for certain, that men have to do the most. That is the honest truth. Whether you believe that it's 50-50 between man and female or not, men have to do and handle the most. And for good reason. Men are bigger and stronger. That's the borderline deciding factor. They handle more difficult tasks. They're looked as the stronger figure. So they are looked at to handle the more difficult situations. Now, if you have a partner, then that helps the ease. But there are very many traditional relationships that still, even if you are in the relationship 50-50 emotionally, handling all the situations together, the man himself has to be still looked at an idol of strength to keep the family together. So I do think men should have a certain level of confidence, of strength, of awareness, of this is how I should be. This is how I'm supposed to be. This is how I grow to be better and handle the situation. It requires yourself being a little bit more logical. And it requires yourself to really assess things more than react to things. I do think that is a very important trait for a man. Based on multiple accounts of different perspectives in American society, if you react emotionally based off pure emotion, it can lead you to do very undesirable things or very dumb ones. Undesirable in terms of your perception is not going to be looked at as masculine, or the actions you take can be potentially dangerous to not only yourself but to others as well. Because like I said, you're bigger, you're stronger. So it requires a level of steadiness, but also a level of understanding of one's own emotions. Now, this is a little bit hard, and this is going to be very important for the parents to be very aware or very steadfast in teaching your child to be aware of what they're feeling as they grow up. Hey, are you feeling angry? This is what anger feels like. Hey, are you feeling sad? This is what sadness feels like. Hey, are you feeling happy? This is what happiness feels like. This is a very important role for the role models to teach the kids as they grow up so they understand their emotions. So a man will grow up, understand the emotions he's feeling, react logically, and assess everything appropriately. But there needs to be relief. And this is a little bit more touchy because you would hope that your partner would be your ultimate key to relief. I can go to my partner for anything, right? You would hope that would be the case, but a lot of times it's not. Some very, very good couples, it is, where you will have that relief with your significant other. Where when it's time, after all the tribulations, everything that you went through, after you understood what you're feeling and you reacted appropriately based on the situation to make sure you're okay and the people around you are okay. At that point, when the relief comes, you have it when it comes to your partner. But like I said, that is not always the case. But you still need the relief. You still need an outlet for your emotions. Bottling them up and pretending they're not there is not a healthy way to do this. You can go to a therapist. That's also a very appropriate way. If you're close to your parents, you can go to them. Another appropriate way. If you have a very, very close friend and you guys can talk about anything with one another, you can go to him or her, and that will be very appropriate as well. But if you have no one, which could be in a lot of situations the case, where you have no one to turn to, you don't have a partner, or you don't have a partner that is willing to hear you out, you don't have parents that you can confide in, or you don't want to confide in your parents, you don't have a close friend that will listen to your emotions and your problems, then what next? Or you can't even afford a therapist. Now, I will preach constantly because I really think in terms of American society, mental health is deteriorating based on all the new levels of stimulus and the broken values of interaction. I do think that the usefulness of mental health stability is going to be more important going on further and further. What does that mean? More and more people should be talking to therapists, and therapy should be more and more intertwined with schools and general health care. But that is a conversation for a different day. But let's say you don't want to go to your therapist, or you can't afford a therapist, right? Going on social media and pouring out your lungs is not a useful way of doing things to random people. Because random people, you don't want advice from random people. They can tell you the dumbest things in terms of how to react to stuff. And they generally don't care. So looking for recompense, it's not the word. Looking for some types of solace from random people on the internet is not the solution. So you need an outlet that is not interpersonal. Now this may sound crazy, but there is a lot of different solutions here. One, writing it down. Writing down your pain. Seeing it in front of you. Manifest it. Is actually a very viable solution. Because after looking at what you've been through, after looking at the emotions you felt, you at that point can really assess that this happened. And then you can close the book and move forward. That worked for some people. Other, exercise, sports, playing basketball, working out as hard as you can, doing just jump shots or playing on the field as hard as you can. Letting out all that emotion through physical activity is another good way to do that. There's a lot of different physical activities out there. A lot of ways to relieve stress, to relieve tension. Even if you're playing the sport and you start crying, go for it. And of course, other things you can do is a lot more creative or giving your mentality some work as well, such as video games or playing some random game or doing some brain puzzle. Just stuff to keep your brain active, constantly flowing, constantly moving. After all that relief, I do recommend still talking to someone. But this time your emotions are let out, the tension is gone, and you can talk about this firmly without looking like you are demasculined. I don't even think that's a word. Because whether you agree with it or not, the essence of masculinity is very essential in society, period. Some people may accept you being more feminine, but I do think that's the exception, not the rule. So that is my personal take on how you should deal with said situations. It's a step-by-step process, and deservingly so. Because when it comes to emotions, they should be handled very delicately. Whether you're a woman or a man, it doesn't really matter in that situation. And it requires a consistent effort from everyone involved. From the people that are closest to you, from your parents raising you, from you yourself as the individual. Now, these are my 2 rants of today's episode for the podcast. To kind of consolidate them for one more second or one more time to wrap out my final thoughts in regards to both. The student debt situation in regards to Joe Biden relieving everybody from student debt, I do think has some validity and have some value. The college education program and system, I do think, is broken and doesn't really teach people to be successful, but teaches them to be workers and eventually kind of coerces them to go into debt in terms of college. Very few people are able to get out of that with scholarships and whatnot, but for a vast majority of people, they end college in debt, and a lot of the times going into a career that has nothing to do with their degree in the first place. Is it possible that Joe Biden is using this as a political move? Sure. Is it possible that this could increase taxes or be unfair to the people who have paid it off? Sure. But one thing we all should agree on is that the education system is broken and definitely needs some rejuvenation. And as for the question, how are men supposed to handle their emotions? I don't think the advice of men should hold it in and just be a man is good advice. I don't think men just relieving all the and vomiting all their emotions and being a crybaby is also good advice. I do think that there is a way to handle this for men that should be taught more appropriately. They should be raised to understand their emotions. They should logically assess their situations and how they're feeling. They should find an outlet of relief, whether that's someone else or a physical or mental activity, and then eventually talking about the situation calmly and logically until they feel better. There's a way to do it where the essence of masculinity stays intact, but you're still able to get the proper support that you deserve. So hope everybody enjoyed today's podcast episode. Hope everybody's going to enjoy the new changes and the updates we're going to have for this podcast. I have so many plans for this podcast moving forward as we change the way news is kind of broadcasted, discussions are being had, and debates are being met. Hope you guys enjoyed. Y'all have a good one. Take care and peace.